Hey guys, it's Terrence Perfita again. Just doing a quick run through of my current event slides. This first one here is a new. They want to build a data center and power plant on an existing brownfield site. It's a redevelopment from a Chrysler plant that was shut down. They want to put in a 900,000 square feet of data center, and this was an interesting. And part of that is a natural gas power plant to generate power for the space and the surrounding get back into the grid to help kind of fund the project. So it's been put in front of the city council for approval, and residents are really starting to complain about it because they don't want the power plant in their backyard. And this is it's kind of important when you're talking about relations with the public. The CEO of the data center company says, "This is a data facility, folks. It's not a power plant. We're not generating electricity and selling it back to the grid." But a key part of their plan is to sell it back to the grid. So it's kind of causing a lot of friction, and the project is going to get bogged down and delayed while they fight this out to see if it's going to go. So it's very important to make sure that you've got public support for a massive project going forward. This next one is OSHA proposes tougher limits for silica dust exposure. There's been a decade of studies that show that silica dust is not good. The proposal is to reduce the limit from 250 micrograms to 50. Uh, the feel in the industry is that exposure to silica is going to become what asbestos was back in the what asbestos was during the 70s, and all the mesothelioma and similar symptoms are going to come about due to these silica studies. So they just want to pull it down a little bit and make sure that everybody's using the correct face protection. Now, this is the Leo Frio Memorial Bridge on Interstate 43 in Green Bay, Wisconsin. The bridge is having an uneven settlement issue. They're not really sure what the cause is, but there's 22 inches of settlement on one side for the single pier, and 27 on the other side, just across it, which is causing a lot of problems. They attached sensors to see if it's moving anymore, and it hasn't. They tried to figure out what was wrong, if it was poor soils. There is a nearby landfill, and when they were renovating the bridge, they may have vibrated and compacted some of the soil, not on purpose, but at the time of the article, they weren't sure what had caused it. This is the Southern Delivery System in Southern Colorado. It's a water management system. It's a $1 billion project. It's going to go on for the next 10 years. It's got two phases. The first phase is already underway, but the end result is that they get 50 million gallons of water done or out to the public. There's a bunch of pipe stations. What's interesting is that this type of project is going to be huge if the EPA's estimate is correct, where they're saying that we need $384 billion in upgrades on our water infrastructure in the United States by the year 2030. So that's going to be a big market moving forward. This is they're building a pontoon bridge in Seattle. There was a problem with one of the pontoons. It actually cracked, so they had to replace it. It's a $4.65 billion rework of Route 520. So they build these concrete pontoons and then go out and float them in the river, and the bridge actually floats on them. So when they post-tension the concrete in here, it caused the concrete to crack, and there are 3 other pontoons going that use the same design, that they made some modifications to help try and reduce the amount of cracking. Another interesting thing on this project is they had a safety incident where alcohol was being consumed on the job site, and there was there's been a lot of controversy going around on this project and the way it's been managed. It's just interesting that gets measured, or that something like that will get remembered, even though the crack is completely separate from the safety incident. Every newspaper article almost always references the safety incident as something that was going on earlier in the project. So the cost of the rework of this single pontoon is $72 million, or $71.2 million, and they just got it resolved here in October from middle of the summer. This is in San Francisco. There was an existing structure that they were going to remodel. And in order to bring it up to seismic code, they were going to have to do extensive seismic installation on the inside. So instead of performing standard modifications, they looked at a Japanese pagoda, which has a single tree trunk in the middle that supports and stabilizes the core. So they do the same thing here, where they take the core with the elevators and they put it on a bearing on an individual mat. So this entire core can pivot and shake and move separate from the outside of the walls. So it's an 8 million pound core that sits on this bearing. And the idea is that it'll limit the inter-story drift during an earthquake event. By doing this, they save $4 million in retrofit costs and 10 weeks off the construction schedule. So it kind of shows the importance of modern technology or new designs on schedule and cost. This is the Atlantic Yards project in Brooklyn, where New York City is currently being sued over this project. This project uses a modular construction method where the apartments are built in a factory and shipped to the job site. The units are then assembled on the site, and their final mechanical and plumbing connections are made. The lawsuit stems on that all the apartment units don't have licensed professionals installing the plumbing equipment to certify it. The people being sued have responded that we do hire licensed plumbers, so it's going to come down to a jurisdictional thing, whether or not the plumbers should be New York local, or if they need to be, or if they are union contractors, but if they need to be New York local union contractors versus where they are fabricated. So they're set for opening oral arguments in November. This was a study performed in California on the new hybrid system. So there was a big incentive put out by the government for hybrid construction equipment. And a lot of vouchers were distributed in California. California already did 1 million out there. And so then this study kind of came along behind it. It was a 2-year study. They spent $2 million studying the emissions from these hybrid machines, and they found that the smog-causing pollutant NOx had an increase between 1 and 13%, depending on the piece of equipment and the activity. However, the equipment was providing a fuel savings of 14 to 16%. So these machines don't have the selective catalytic reduction systems that are required by 2014 for tractor trailers that use urea to take it to almost zero. And since they're hybrid, they're in kind of a gray area that it hasn't been, legislation hasn't really defined it yet. And in addition to that, there is also, since they're a new technology or a new balance, they aren't really as fine-tuned as the other products put out by these manufacturers. So there's a chance that these numbers could improve without the addition of the selective catalytic reduction systems. This is a bridge in Jacksonville. The title is FDOT Scrambles to Make Repairs to Matthews Bridge. A Navy-owned ship, it was just, I believe, a transport ship, crashed into the bridge. It was during a high tide on a storm. They believe it was on a storm tide. So the ship came in, and it was supposed to, on the paper, it's supposed to have 4 foot of clearance, and it obviously didn't. It took out a structural member. You can see it in the upper picture, bent in, and then it's a little bit more dramatic in the lower picture. So the bridge has been taken out of use. There are normally 56,500 vehicles going over this every day, but they've stopped that. So this department, or the Florida Department of Transportation, said, all right, we think it's going to take 40 days and put it out to bid, and we'll give you a $50,000 a day bonus if you finish early, up to $500,000, so they can get it back on track. So there's a positive incentive for finishing early. There is something that's a little bit weird, is that Florida, the Department of Transportation, estimated it at $3 million, and the contractor who had the low number bid 1.07. So that's a pretty big disparity, and I believe that we'll probably see another news article on this in a couple of weeks. about how they either didn't miss the deadline, or I mean, it could be something, a safety incident on the job, or some shortcut. So it's just an interesting, no float schedule where everything's on the critical path. So wanted to show you guys that. Lastly, I've got Duke Energy cancels a $24.7 billion nuke plant. This Duke Energy has been planning on building 2 reactors. What's interesting, though, is they convinced the legislature to allow them to pre-bill existing customers in the area for fees to fund this project. So as of now, they've collected $1 billion from their future customers, and now they're canceling it. They'll continue to collect through 2014, and they're expected to get another $500 million on that. So it's 2 1,100 megawatt units. They've already spent $500 million on the development of the design and the site and the I guess the logistics and planning of it. Instead, they're putting up a natural gas plant that they should be able to get up faster, but they are going to keep the site open as a possible nuclear plant in the future. So the company's pulling out because they said the legislative body was being uncertain. They couldn't get their permits from the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, so they didn't know what was going on. And a lot of the articles that you'll find on this one, if you were going to follow up on it, don't mention that the state did get something by letting them keep the advance fees, and that is that the base electricity rates provided by Duke Energy will not rise until 2018, when they locked in the electricity rate for another 5 years, which might end up being a larger savings, but the publicity right now is all kind of negative on Duke. Thank you for taking the time to review these current events with me, and I'll talk to you guys later.